We're talking to Twyla Moon, who's the Greenland expert for the National Snow and Ice Data Center. We've talked a lot over the years as you've been back and forth to Greenland and watching it melt away, but it's melting away at an exponential rate at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The Greenland ice sheet actually was mostly in balance in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, but it's now lost ice every year since 1998 at an accelerating rate. And the coast there is transforming as the ice sheet shrinks, but more importantly, hundreds of millions of people around the globe are potentially feeling that influence as it transforms the coasts in low and mid latitudes. So losing ice from Greenland really shows up directly on our shores. We already see it happening, for example, in the US.
So we're talking about places like Miami and even the coast of Texas. Southern Texas is getting a lot of the sea level rise and subsidence. So the whole world's connected, just one ocean. So it doesn't matter that it's in Greenland or Iceland. It's one world. We only get this one planet.
Yeah, absolutely. It is connected, and counterintuitively, actually, the effects of losing ice in Greenland are felt most strongly in places further away from it. And so folks in Greenland might actually see their local sea levels lower, but it's those of us in places far away that have that water arriving in our shores, causing coastal erosion. We get salt water inundating freshwater resources, flooding in places that have never experienced it, and disrupting a lot of the infrastructure that we've built on our coasts, mega cities, security infrastructure, military infrastructure, sewer and water systems. So it's a real challenge for those of us who might otherwise think that the poles are far away from us.
And the weird thing is that, I guess it's not weird, but you got to think of it globally as a planet. When you lose so much ice on Greenland, it actually changes the gravity of the Earth.
Yeah, exactly. That's part of the reason that we feel the effects far away, is that huge mass of ice in Greenland. I mean, remember, the ice sheet in Greenland covers the world's largest island. It reaches a couple miles thick of ice in the interior. It's an amount of ice that is truly unimaginable. And as we're losing that ice, it's no longer using the mass of that ice to pull the ocean water towards it. It changes the gravitational field of the Earth and sends that water further away. Actually, one of the ways that we measure how much ice there is in Greenland is by measuring changes in Earth's gravity.
That's by using those two satellites that go around, the GRACE satellites that go around the Earth.
Exactly. These two satellites that work in pair to understand how the Earth's gravity is changing.
We're standing here at an art exhibit for the country of Tuvalu, which is not Arctic. It's a tiny little nation, a dot in the ocean, very far away from the Arctic. So why are there polar bears here wearing life jackets?
Yeah, I have to say I was so appreciative of the nation of Tuvalu making it very clear that we are on a connected Earth and that changes happening at the poles are showing up in places at the equator and nearby and in mid-latitudes where we live in the US. So unfortunately, we'd love to keep these changes in little small places or be able to, build wild engineering walls or things like this to contain the change, but that's not what's happening. We're emitting globally and we're feeling the effects globally.
The prediction is that the nation of Tuvalu will be gone in 20 years. And not only is that a tragedy for the people who will lose their home country, but that causes massive migration around the world as well.
Yeah, it's been difficult that we have really built our common contemporary infrastructure, our societies, in a time where we've had a very stable climate, and that's included a stable sea level. And we've very carefully and thoughtfully built borders all over the Earth's map, and those borders are going to be transformed by changes in sea level rise. And it's going to be a challenge for us to learn how to cooperate and really work together to become more sustainable and resilient. As we look towards what science tells us is necessary to avoid the worst and irreversible damages, those pathways require international cooperation, and that includes figuring out how to help nations who are truly going to lose their entire nation.
And as we were in Greenland, down there in Kulisuk, and walking through the glaciers and walking on top of them, we could see how far that glacier has receded. So explain for people who haven't been there, haven't seen it up close, and it's almost unexplainable because you can see all the video, you can do all the research, but until you stand on top of a glacier, there's something that, from my experience, changes your perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I actually became a glaciologist because I had my first interaction with a large glacier, and it really felt like a living thing to me, and I said, that's what I want to do, ice. And when you're there, not only do you have these incredible, towering areas of ice, but you can also hear the change, like booming thunder as we lose this ice and it breaks off into the ocean. It's truly a full senses experience. And it's not something that I would say we can appreciate kind of in our normal scales of understanding things. I mean, think about the Antarctic ice sheet. The continental U.S. easily fits within that map boundary. And just imagine the full U.S. and more covered by miles of ice.
The type of climate denialism that we see in the U.S. and we hear, and as soon as I post this on Twitter, I'm just watching the comments roll in, and I'll just send the popcorn, gift to them. But the thing is that something we see just in the U.S., or is that something that you hear of all throughout the world? That kind of denialism.
The U.S. does have some particularly strong climate denialism. Unfortunately, areas of politics in the U.S. have continued to hold on to a sort of denial of human-caused climate change, and that's made it a particularly sticky issue. But when you actually look at the swath of what individuals in the U.S. are thinking, there is a small vocal minority over here that's in denial, and their heels are really dug in. But there's a much wider swath of people in the middle zone who are listening, they're curious, they're noticing the changes happening around them, more wildfire smoke, more flooding, droughts, these kinds of changes that are starting to look different in their neighborhoods and states, and they're starting to be curious and wonder about what's going on. And it's about talking with those people about how climate change does connect to health and connect to our local communities, and moving that curiosity to more understanding, and moving that to concern, and moving that concern to action. So I think there's actually a large middle of people who are paying attention and becoming increasingly concerned and active.
Even the people in deep red Texas, when they are inundated with water year after year after year, I've talked to some people out there who say, I'm moving out, and I ask them, is this something that maybe millions of people will join in with you as moving away from the coastline? And they say, yes. So you're basically evacuating and going somewhere to higher land.
Exactly.
You're one of millions who might make that choice.
Exactly.
The climate change, we're getting the amount of water we're getting dropped on us in the amount of time. There's no drainage system that actually can handle that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think people are actually moving because of changes in climate. They're not calling it that, but maybe you're in a place where it's become harder to have summer drinking water, and extreme events, that's a big, broad category, but things that include in it include the deep freeze that was experienced in Texas.
Yeah.
Extreme events don't always just come with being really hot, right?
Yeah.
But it's experiencing these that make us look around and think, gosh, would there be somewhere more comfortable? But for those who want to stay in place, I hope it's also making them wonder, hey, how might I change so that I can exist in this better in the future? Hey, maybe I'm a farmer, I'm going to think about what crops I could grow that are hardier. I'm doing ranching and I'm going to think about what kind of stock I could have who would better deal with the changes in climate that I'm going to see locally. So I think there's a lot we can also do in place to become more resilient to the changes we know are coming.
And it's not just global warming, it's global weirding as well.
Yeah. Exactly. It's changes in precipitation, changes in temperature, both on the hot and the cold end, and just events that you think, we've never seen this before.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
So what can be done here at COP? What decisions can be made here that can have a real impact and try to keep us under 1.5 degrees C?
Yeah, here at COP, we have international leaders negotiating about how it is that we can change our energy systems, our food systems, support developing nations to move into having energy and lights on, but via renewables, and also thinking about how we make those translations, how we reduce methane emissions, carbon emissions within the US. But the thing is, we can't just look to these leaders to do all of the hard work. Actually, every one of us has a role to play. We all have a sphere of influence, right? Maybe it's my family, maybe it's my community, my school, and I can think like, what is the conversation I can start here about actions we can take? Because we are in a time right now where we need all of the solutions, and so find something that connects with your sphere of influence, connects with your passion and interests, and explore that together with other people.
Dr. Twyla Moon, the brilliant glaciologist from the National Snow and Ice Data Center, and you're going back to Greenland. You're going to be keeping an eye on what's happening there. As the water melts there, it's going to affect you at home. We only have this one ocean.